Musical Comedy Tonight 3. The Spark and the Glue. Presented by Sylvia Fine-Kay and starring in alphabetical order Eddie Albert, Christine Andreas, Kay Ballard, Greg Birch, Florence Henderson, Beth Howland, Patti LaBelle, Donna McKechnie, Peter Noon, Roberta Peters, Clive Revel, Elaine Stritch, Dick Van Dyke, and Irene Dunn, Paul Robeson, Helen Morgan, Alan Jones, Hattie McDaniel, courtesy of MGM, and the Dance Theater of Harlem Workshop Ensemble. Recreating performances from The Boys from Syracuse, Showboat, Connecticut Yankee, and Leave It to Jane.
Leave it to Jane, Jane, Jane. She is the girl with brain. No problem, you can listen her, please her, a strain. Shoot, tackle, Katie, a score or more, Katie, if something is on your mind. Comfort you soon will find. If you have started worrying, kindly refrain. Leave it to Jane, Jane.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Sylvia Fine, and sometimes I am. Other times, I just throw my hands up and wait to see who will catch them. Tonight, we're going to investigate the origins of musical comedy, with sets, costumes, and orchestrations as close to the original shows as possible. We call it the spark and the glue. The spark being what started it, and the glue what made it stick and become our only indigenous art form. Anyhow, the song you almost just heard was part of the spark. It's the title song from Leave It to Jane, and if it weren't for Gilbert and Sullivan, who did not write it, it never would have been written. To begin at the beginning, Gilbert and Sullivan were the grandparents of musical comedy, not vaudeville burlesque minstrel shows or The Black Crook, which was produced in 1866 and has often been mistakenly called the first musical comedy. Actually, it was no more than a shotgun wedding between a German melodrama and a French ballet company whose theater had burned down. And it became a wildly successful extravaganza featuring overdone scenery, underdone costumes, and overweight girls. But it took from 1878, when Gilbert and Sullivan's Hm's Pinafore. I know it's HMS Pinafore, but I like to say Hm's Pinafore. Anyhow, it took from 1878, when Hm's Pinafore took America by storm, until 1917 for anyone to figure out their secret, although it was as plain as the nose on Gilbert's face, which was pretty plain. For the first time anywhere, lyrics were as important as music. Music of style and quality, and lyrics that were witty, literate, lyric, and satiric. And if you think this is a panegyric, it is. Now, grand opera. In grand opera, music is alone in first place, hands down, tonsils up, and everybody dies. And in those all-day Wagner operas, everybody dies, including the people in the audience who forgot to bring lunch. Actually, 100 years earlier, Mozart, before he won all those Academy Awards, laid the groundwork for Gilbert and Sullivan, and therefore for musical comedy, by taking a quantum leap and writing a delightful kind of upstairs, downstairs drawing room opera. I'm talking of no less than The Marriage of Figaro and Così fan tutte, which I have been known to call Tutti's Cozy Fanny, with no disrespect. Although the style was adopted by Rossini and then adapted by Offenbach, too often to suit me, Gilbert and Sullivan were much closer in style and spirit to Mozart. Let's demonstrate with a little song from the Mikado. Here's a Howdy Do, sung by Christine Andreas, star of the Broadway revivals of My Fair Lady, Oklahoma, and On Your Toes, Clive Revel, star of the Broadway productions of Irma la Douce and Oliver, and Peter Noon. And if you don't recognize Peter, behind the Japanese makeup, He's Herman of Herman's Hermits.
My child, my poor child, how shall I break it to her? My little bride that was to have been.
Was to have been?
Yes, you can never be mine.
Oh, I'm so glad.
What? I've just ascertained that under Mikhado's law, when a married man is beheaded, his wife is buried alive.
Buried alive?
Buried alive? Buried alive. It's a most unpleasant death.
Here's a howdy-do. If I marry you, when your time has come to perish, then the maiden whom you cherish must be slaughtered too. Here's a howdy-do. Here's a howdy-do.
Here's a pretty mess, in a month or less. I must die without a wedding. Let the bitter tears I'm shedding witness my distress. Here's a pretty mess, here's a pretty mess.
Here's the state of things. To her life she clings. Matrimonial devotion doesn't seem to suit her notion. Burial it brings. Here's the state of things. Here's the state of things.
With a passion that's intense, I worship and adore. But the laws of common sense we ought to ignore.
If what I say is true, it's death to marry you. Here's a pretty state of things. Here's a pretty howdy-do. Here's a pretty state of things. A pretty state of things.
Here's a howdy.
Here's a howdy. Here's a howdy-do.
Oh, if what I say is true, I cannot marry you. Here's a pretty, pretty state of things. Here's a pretty howdy-do.
For the next 40 years, there was a world-class epidemic of operetta. Music was still alone in first place, but though the lyrics were in English, it was very hard to tell because most of the actors, a term I use loosely, were opera stars manqués who sang in a language I call singers English. So that I Love You becomes I Love You. One of my favorites is that great Victor Herbert song written in a throat specialist's office. Ah, sweet mystery of life, at last I found you. Ah. It was not until musical comedy came along that music and lyrics became all of a piece. And the music punctuates the lyric with invisible commas, periods, and parentheses, but it's really only when it's done wrong that it's noticeable. I used to hear my mother, when I was a child, sing a World War I song, which is a perfect example of the music screwing up the lyric. Try as I might, I could never understand the first line. Smile the while I kiss you Saturday. What's a Saturday? It's the day after Friday. Well, years passed. I was a mother myself when I figured it out. It could only work in 4/4 or 2/4 time. Smile the while I kiss you sad adieu. Sad adieu. Adieu being Tin Pan Alley for the French adieu, which rhymes with ah, love, ailleurs. And we're back with operetta in 1911, right? But on a Saturday in 1914, to be exact, we heard the first sound of a new kind of music that would dominate the theater for the next 50 years. It was interpolated into The Girl from Utah, and in a world of whirling waltzes, it was a love song that came out of left field with a built-in foxtrot beat and a lovely, limpid, declarative melody that has proved to be timeless. It was written by the comparatively unknown Jerome Kern, and it will be sung for us by the Broadway star of Fanny and the Girl Who Came to Supper, Miss Florence Henderson.
When I told them how wonderful you are, they didn't believe me. They didn't believe me. Your lips, your eyes, your cheeks, your hair are in a class beyond compare. You're the loveliest man that one could see. And when I tell them, and I'm certainly going to tell them, that you're the man whose wife one day from this great big world, you've chosen me. And when I tell them, and I'm certainly going to tell them, that you're the man whose wife one day I'll be, they'll never believe me. They'll never believe me that from this great big world you chosen me.
Would you believe that song has lived this long? So there we have the first ingredient of what would become musical comedy. The rest would be taken care of by 2 accidents, a brainwave, and a little trial and error. The first accident, the smallest theater in New York, with only 299 seats, was empty. The brainwave, Elizabeth Marbury, a fine literary agent, had an idea. How about a very small musical show for a very small theater with a very small chorus, a very small orchestra, and a very small cast? And to write it, a very small man with a very big talent, Jerome Kern. A young man who wanted to do something new and do modern musicals about ordinary people with songs fitted naturally into the plot. Goodbye, royalty in disguise and castles on the Rhine. Hello, boy meets girl on the Staten Island ferry. And to write the book, Guy Bolton. And to write the lyrics, anybody. So the first try, Nobody Home, was no home run. The second try, Very Good Eddie, was better. But there was still one key ingredient missing, the lyrics. However, on opening night, history appeared in the person of P.G. Wodehouse. He pointed out that there they were, in a tiny theater with a totally attentive audience. Why then didn't they have lyrics worth listening to? If you will write them, okay, said Kern. Hip hip, said Wodehouse. And on that pregnant note, they went into labor. An American musical comedy was born, and it was a boy. Oh boy, to be exact. And it was the first show with the hallmark of musical comedy. The lyrics were as important as the music. Oh boy was off and running. Wodehouse and Kern were going to do even better before the year was out. The year was 1917. The Russian Revolution totally changed the course of the 20th century. America entered World War I. The teaching of German was banned from public schools. German opera was dropped by the Met. And all families named Spritz and Wasser changed their names to Fontaine. And on August 28th, Leave It to Jane, the new Kern-Bolton-Woodhouse show, danced its way uptown into the Longacre Theater. Because, to everyone's astonishment and joy, Oh Boy was still packing them in at the Princess, Leave It to Jane had to be adapted to a larger theater. And that was the second accident, and how we got the first prototype of musical comedy as it was to be. More chorus girls, larger orchestra, more elaborate sets and costumes. Now, Leave It to Jane was based on The College Widow. The football-mad students of Atwater College take one look at their pathetic football team and decide there is no hope unless they can steal Billy Bolton, the superstar football player, away from Bingham College and get him to play under an assumed name for dear old Atwater, which wasn't very old and was no place near water. Why he had to play under an assumed name when he could have played under a football helmet, I will never know. And furthermore, how did they plan to pull this crazy thing off? No problem. They would simply leave it to Jane, the Theda Barra of Pottsville Junction. She's played tonight by Christine Andreas. So let's go back to the beginning, which, if you remember, ended before it finished. And we will leave it it to Jane. Jane.
Leave it to Jane, Jane, Jane.
I don't know why I should have to plot and plan for you.
She is the girl with
I always try to do everything I can for you.
no problem you can wish on her, gives her a strain. She'll tackle gaily a score or more daily if something is on your mind.
And I can see that there is not a doubt of it.
Comfort you soon will
Leave
find.
it to me, I will soon get you out of it.
If you have started worrying, kindly refrain. Just hand the whole thing over to Jane.
I've been that way from a child, they say. When I was but 2, I just always knew the right thing to do. My tact and my sense were simply immense.
That's why we say with further intent. Just leave it to Jane, Jane, Jane. Leave it to Jane, Jane, Jane. She is the girl with brain. If you have started worrying, kindly refrain. Leave it to Jane, Jane, Jane.
Something is on your mind. Comfort you soon will find. If you have started worrying, kindly refrain. Just hand the whole thing over to Jane.
Jane, just hand the whole thing over to Jane.
Meanwhile, Flora, the college's half-time waitress and full-time half-wit, is serving ice cream at the college dance and trying for the 7th year in a row to snag a college man for herself, which she figures she could do if she were only somebody else, like that irresistible queen of Egypt, Cleopatra. She is played tonight by one of my favorite performers, featured on Broadway's The Reluctant Bride and Company, and loved throughout the world of television as Vera the Waitress, Miss Beth Howland.
Where is Jane?
How should I know?
She had this dance with me.
Well, you know what she is when she's just hooked a new one.
And I gave up that brilliant offer from Michigan University so as I could be near her. Who cost Mark Anthony the world? A woman.
Yes, and her name was Cleopatra.
Cleopatra is a most demoralizing example for a respectable modern woman to follow.
Just the same, a girl could get away with an awful lot of stuff in them days. In days of old, beside the Nile, a famous queen there dwelt. Her clothes were few but full of style, her figure slim and svelte. On every man that wandered by, she pulled the Theta Barai. The men all hollered, hips hooray, when she danced in that Egyptian way. I'd be like Cleopatra if I could have my way. Each man she met, she went and kissed, and she dozens on her waiting list. I wish that I had lived there beside the pyramids. For a girl today don't get the scope that Cleopatra did. She danced to dances now and then, the sort that make you blush. Each time she did them, scores of men were injured in the crush. They'd stand there gaping in a line, watch her agitate her spine. It really used to knock them flat when she went like this and then like that.
Was the wibbly wobbly wiggly dance that Cleopatra, Cleopatra, Cleopatra dance?
The princess lit the beacon for the generation to follow, and what a dazzling array that was. By some historic happenstance, America had bred within that one generation an extraordinary number of all-time great composers and lyricists. Just imagine, all in the 1920s, having George and Ira Gershwin, Dick Rogers and Larry Hart, Vincent Youmans, Oscar Hammerstein, Cole Porter, Schwartz and Dietz, plus Irving Berlin and Jerry Kern, all writing at the same time for such performers as Fred and Adele Astaire, Gertie Lawrence, Marilyn Miller, Al Jolson, Victor Moore, Bill Gaxton, Jeanette MacDonald, Burt Lahr, Eddie Cantor, Fanny Brice, Beatrice Lillie, Libby Holman, Clifton Webb, Ruby Keeler, Ray Bolger, Grace Moore, Ed Wynn, Will Rogers, Bobby Clark, Irene Dunn, and Jimmy Durante. And this was the generation which supplied the glue that made musical comedy stick, with innovations and variations that kept it alive and vital. The first significant variation came only 7 years later, in 1924, with the sound of a lone clarinet pushing against the edge of a blue note, sliding and soaring from a low F to a high B flat and into a casual spill of notes that would forever spell jazz from New York to the far reaches of the world. That, of course, was the opening of Rhapsody in Blue, written in 3 weeks between rehearsals for a show by a 25-year-old talented genius named George Gershwin. If anyone here has never heard of George Gershwin, would you step up, please? And I will greet our first visitors from Mars. But 1924 was not only the year that Gershwin brought jazz into the concert hall, but also the year in which he and his first big Broadway hit, Lady Be Good, found a way to translate jazz into an idiom that would work in the theater. To show how revolutionary that was and put it into perspective, that year, the two most popular songs were Indian Love Call and The Nation Rose as One and sent its favorite son to the White House, to see the president, to ask the burning question that involved the continent. Does the spearmint lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight? If you put it on the left side, we find it on the right. Can't you see I'm going crazy? Won't somebody set me right? Does the spearmint lose its flavor on the bedpost overnight? Top 10. Can't be for my singing, has to be for Billy Rose's lyrics. But Lady Be Good was remarkable for a number of things. It was the very first starring vehicle for Fred and Adele Astaire, and most important of all, it marked the beginning of Gershwin's full-time collaboration with his brother Ira, one of our all-time great lyricists, as wry, shy, and self-effacing as his brother was flamboyant. Words were Ira's toys, and he loved to play games with them, as, for instance, in that delightful song he wrote for Astaire and Rogers. I say tomato and you say tomato. I say potato and you say potato. Tomato, tomato, potato, potato. Let's call the whole thing off. The most remarkable performance of that was given by an English woman who sang, I say tomato and you say tomato. I say potato. She could never figure out what was wrong. So the Gershwins became collaborators, not because they were brothers, but because their talents were a perfect mesh. They adored each other, they respected each other, and they fought each other to a standstill until they got a song that was absolutely seamless and sounded as if the music and lyrics had come out of one head. Let's take, for instance, Fascinating Rhythm, the song that best embodies the new sound of Gershwin's music, with its nervous rhythms and the cocky strut of the second strain, and the almost hypnotic lyric, which is totally inseparable from the music and makes you syncopate the music absolutely right. It will be done for you by one of the stars of Sophisticated Ladies. Just wait till you see him in the new movie of A Chorus Line, and wait till you see him here and now, tonight, Mr. Greg Verge.
Fascinating rhythm, you got me on the go. Fascinating rhythm, I'm all a quiver. What a mess you're making, the neighbors want to know why I'm always shaking just like a flipper. Each morning I get up with the sun, I start a hopping, never stopping, to find at night no work has been done. I know that once it didn't matter, but now you do me wrong when I start to patter. I'm so unhappy. Won't you take the day off and start to run along somewhere far away off and make it snappy? Oh, how I long to be the man I used to be. A fascinating rhythm, please won't you stop picking on me?
So we leave George and Ira Gershwin to write hit after hit, and only 3 years later, in 1927, America was riding a bull market, living high on the hog and putting on the dog. In Paris, Epstein finished his Madonna and Child, so finished his Seated Woman, and the Brooklyn Dodgers finished third. But on Broadway, the streets were alive, the chorus girls were kicking, and a Connecticut Yankee woke up in King Arthur's court to the sound of music and lyrics written by Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart. It swept into town like a new broom and marked another step forward in the history of musical comedy. In tracing that history, it's fascinating to conjecture what other kinds of careers might have been chosen by Rodgers and Hart, the Gershwins, and even Cole Porter, if it hadn't been for Kernan Woodhouse, both of whom they absolutely adored, and who inspired them to follow in their footsteps in the musical comedy theater. Their individual styles, of course, were quite different. Where George Gershwin's music had muscles and legs, Dick Rodgers' music had wings. Where Ira's lyrics were warm, optimistic, and playful, Larry Hart's were sharp and ironic, wistful and haunting. Now, if Dick Rodgers' music was like anyone else's, I think it was like Kern's. And it's amazing that it was those two romantic melodists, rather than the intellectuals of the theater, who did the most to advance and enrich musical comedy. So when Rodgers chose an American classic, Mark Twain's Connecticut Yankee, as the basis for a show, it was a conscious attempt to raise the quality and substance of the book. Musical books in that time were so thin their underwear was showing. Presto Chango, it became one of Rodgers and Hart's longest-running hits, faithful to Mark Twain except for an updated prologue. At a black tie wingding in Hartford, Connecticut, Fay Morgan is so angry at her fiancé for flirting with another girl that she hits him over the head with a champagne bottle. I don't know what year the champagne was, but he wakes up in the 6th century. On the road to Camelot, where he sees a great-looking dame dressed for Halloween. She also talks funny. He finally manages to communicate with her in a language that is a cross between American slang and Old English. I would say like Ameriglish, consisting of many gadzooks, zounds, and woots. More than slightly encouraged, he forsooths his way into a song. Fortunately for us, it's Rodgers at his breezy best, and Larry Hart with the very first lyric ever written in Ameriglish, or for that matter, Anglican. It is called Thou Swell, and will be sung and danced by the first Broadway star of A Chorus Line, Miss Donna McKechnie, and the Broadway star of Bye Bye Birdie, Mr. Dick Van Dyke.
Look, sit thee down and stay thee put under this sapling with this stripling. I gotta get the lowdown here.
Wouldst hold my hand, good master?
Wouldst? My, what a cute little fist.
Thou hast indeed noble fingers.
Yeah, 5 of a kind.
Wouldst kiss my lips, my lord?
Dern tootin' I wouldst. Lift thy pan.
'Tis good. Another? Thou art very beautiful.
Look, you mustn't ever refer to a man as beautiful. I mean, if you want to be perfectly frank, you could say I'm handsome.
Thou art in sooth.
You know something? We didn't meet for nothing. There's a reason for all this.
'Tis a blessed event.
Whoa, not so fast. Babe, we are well met, as in a spell net. I lift my helmet. Sandy, you're just dandy for just this here lad.
Thine arms are martial, thou hast grace. My cheek is partial to thy face. And if thy lips grow weary, mine are their resting place.
Thou swell, thou witty, thou sweet, thou grand.
Wouldst kiss me pretty, wouldst hold my hand.
Both thine eyes are cute too, what they do to me. Hear me holler, I choose a sweet lollapalooza indeed.
I'd feel so rich in a hut for two
rooms and kitchen, I'm sure
would do.
Give me just a plot of, not a lot of land. And thou swell, thou witty, thou grand. Thou swell,
Thou witty,
thou sweet,
thou pretty,
thou swell, thou witty, thou grand.
This is not in the script, but I think they're just fabulous together. Meanwhile, Queen Morgan Le Fay, the king's half-sister and full-time witch, comes to court hunting for a man because she's clean out of husbands, 7 out of 7 to be exact. And she got rid of every spouse when he lost his spice. And she wants to eat her cake while she still has her teeth. For the 1943 revival, Rodgers and Hart added a new song about all of that. It was called To Keep My Love Alive, which he certainly did not. And although it was to be the last lyric Larry Hart ever wrote, he died only 3 days after opening night of pneumonia, brought on by drink, brought on by heartbreak. It still sparkles with malice in the palace, and shall we add vessel in the pestle. And we include it tonight in tribute to Larry Hart, probably the most versatile of all our great lyricists. It will be sung for you tonight by the star of Noel Cowart's Sail Away and of Steve Sondheim's company, who has come back from a triumphant 13-year stay in London, really just to sing it for you tonight, Miss Elaine Stritch.
I've been married and married, and often I've sighed. I'm never the bridesmaid, I'm always the bride. I have never divorced them, I hadn't the heart. Yet remember these sweet words, till death do us part. I've married many men, a ton of them, because I was untrue to none of them, because I bumped off every one of them to keep my love alive. Sir Paul was frail, he looked a wreck to me. At night he was a horse's neck to me. So I performed an appendectomy to keep my love alive. Sir Thomas had insomnia. He couldn't sleep at night. I bought a little arsenic. He's sleeping now. All right. Sir Athelstane indulged in fratricide. He killed his dad, and that was patricide. One night I stabbed him by my matricide to keep my love alive. To keep my love alive. I thought Sir George had possibilities, but his flirtations made me ill at ease. And when I'm ill at ease, I kill at ease to keep my love alive. Sir Charles came from a sanatorium and yelled for drinks in my emporium. I mixed one drink, he's in memoriam, to keep my love alive. Sir Francis was a singing bird, a nightingale, and that's why I tossed him off my balcony just to see if he could fly. Sir Philip played the harp. I cussed the thing. I crowned him with his harp to bust the thing. And now he plays where harps are just the thing to keep my love alive. To keep my love alive.
Not quite 2 months later, a lavish musical called Showboat sailed into the Ziegfeld Theater and made history. And with Showboat, Jerry Kern, this time with Oscar Hammerstein, created another new form, which eventually revolutionized musical theater, only 10 years after he had fathered the first musical comedy. Now, Showboat was based on Edna Ferber's best-selling novel, and there is no way to exaggerate the impact, the importance, and the quality of that score. Although it was originally presented as a musical comedy, there was no question but that it was something else again and more. A colorful story about show business on the Mississippi in the 1880s, it was also about a romantic love affair that became an unhappy marriage and about the tragedy arising from miscegenation, which is hard enough to pronounce, let alone to write about in a musical. Kern and Hammerstein did it with a score that combined the best elements of musical comedy with the dramatic and melodic scope of an American folk opera. And that was a first, and it required a new description. They decided on musical play, which is quite different from a play with music. It's like the difference between a penthouse and an apartment with some windows open. And they came up with a dazzling cast, most of whom also starred in the 1936 black and white film, which is as close as you can possibly get to the original stage version. So tonight, I would like you to see excerpts from that film with Paul Robeson, Helen Morgan, and the girl who understudied the leading lady on Broadway, then starred in the Road Company and got her first big break in this picture, Miss Irene Dunne. Let's start. Very near the beginning, the chance meeting of Magnolia, daughter of the captain of the Showboat, played by Irene Dunne, and Gaylord Ravenel, the quintessential Mississippi gambler, played by Alan Jones.
Let's suppose we've just met.
Well, we really have.
Well, let's suppose we've fallen in love at first sight.
Only make believe I love you. Only make believe that you love me. Others find peace of mind in pretending. Couldn't you, couldn't I, couldn't we make believe our lips are blending in a phantom kiss or two or three. Might as well make believe I love you. For to tell the truth, I do.
The game of just supposing is the sweetest game I know. Our dreams are more romantic than the world we see.
And if the things we dream about don't happen to be so, that's just an unimportant technicality.
We could make believe I love you. We could make believe that you love me.
Might as well make believe I love you. Oh, to tell the truth, I do.
Then Magnolia, absolutely ecstatic over the handsome stranger, rushes to ask Joe, a deckhand, played by Paul Robeson, what he knows about him. Joe, who doesn't want to say, gives her a famous, equivocal answer.
Better ask the old river what he thinks. He knows all about them boys. He knows all about everything.
There's an old man called the Mississippi. That's the old man that I'd like to be. What does he care if the world's got troubles? What does he care if the land ain't free? Old Man River, that old man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling. He keeps on rolling along. He don't plant taters. He don't plant cotton. Them that plants them is soon forgotten. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along. You and me, we sweat and strain, body all aching and racked with pain. Tote that barge, lift that bale, you gets a little drunk and your land's in jail. I get weary and sick of trying. I'm tired of living and scared of dying. But old man River, he just keeps rolling
Meanwhile, Magnolia has been telling Julie about the dashing stranger. Julie and her husband Steve are the stars of the showboat. He is white. She is an octoroon, passing, because miscegenation is against the law. Kern and Hammerstein were strongly advised to drop all that. It was too touchy and serious and would ruin the show. But they refused to compromise. And in the next scene, you will see an excellent example of the use of a song in a dramatic context, exposing emotional cross-currents, character relationships, and plot essentials that turn up later, like the little shuffle Magnolia does. Julie is played by the legendary Helen Morgan, and Queenie is played by Hattie McDaniel.
Fish gotta swim, birds gotta fly. I gotta love one man till I die. Can't help loving that man of mine.
Why, do you know it, Queenie?
For sure I does, but I didn't ever hear anybody but colored folks sing that song. Sounds funny for Miss Julie to know it.
Julie sings it all the time.
Can you sing the whole thing?
Of course I can. What's so funny about that? When he goes away, that's a rainy day. But when he comes back, the day is fine. The sun will shine. He can come home as late as can be. Home without him ain't no home to me. Can't help loving that man of mine.
That's beautiful, Miss Julie.
Why, that's my favorite song.
Soon after, Julie is betrayed to the sheriff, and she and Steve are forced to leave or face criminal charges. Years pass. Ravenel and Magnolia have been married, had a child, and he's left her because of her shameful gambling debts. Desperate, she auditions for a job in a nightclub where we see Julie again. Her husband has been killed, and she's alone, shop-worn, and an alcoholic. Magnolia auditions with Fish Gotta Swim in that little shuffle. Julie recognizes her and purposely goes on a binge so Magnolia can get the job. The scene begins with Julie singing a song originally written by Kernan Woodhouse for Oh Lady Lady, a Princess Theater show. It was taken out of the show before it opened. They tried to put it in several other shows until Jerry Kern found a home for it in Showboat. The lyric was used exactly as Woodhouse first wrote it. And here is Miss Helen Morgan singing the song that made her famous.
I used to dream that I would discover the perfect lover someday. I knew I'd recognize him if ever he came round my way. And I always used to fancy then he'd be one of the godlike kind of men with a giant brain and a noble head, like the heroes bold in the books I've read. He's just my Bill, an ordinary man, and he hasn't got a thing that I can brag about, and yet to be upon his knee, so comfy and roomy, seems natural to me. I can't explain, it's surely not his brain that makes me thrill. I love him because he's, I don't know, because he's just my Bill.
I once asked Edna Ferber what she thought when Jerry asked her for the rights to musicalize her book. I thought he was crazy, she said. My romantic story of the great river with chorus girls running all over the deck. But then, when he played Old Man River for me, I just cried and cried. Edna, who is called Ferber by her friends, or Hatchet Face, or Acid Tongue, she said I cried and cried. And I thought, that Old Man River would surely outlive me and outlive Jerry. And she was right. The next steps forward in musical comedy were made by Dancing Feet, which is not extraordinary. And we get there by way of Berlin. Not Germany, but Irving. The year was 1933, 4 years after Wall Street laid an egg, and the yoke was not funny. Hemlines were heading for the floor, and so was the stock market. Corporate and personal fortunes were being wiped out, and fewer babies were being born with silver spoons in their mouths, which made it easier to understand what they were saying. Spanning the Hudson between New York and New Jersey was the beautiful new George Washington Bridge. But it was too late for George, whose old bridge was terrible. And terrible was the word for the Broadway box office, the one smash hit of the season being a show written by two very talented gents, Moss Hart and Irving Berlin. I'm sure many of you know Jerome Kern's classic answer when he was asked what place Berlin had in American music. Jerry said, "Irving Berlin has no place in American music. He is American music." Well, when you think of Alexander's Ragtime Band, All Alone, Always, Blue Skies, White Christmas, God Bless America, and so much more, so simple, they're the hardest things to write. The name of the show was As Thousands Cheer, which they all did every night. Although it was a revue, it made significant contributions to musical calm, as they call it in London, and had a sharper satire, more panache than most book shows of the time. It was the first major show to use an established, serious choreographer and to use a recognized dance company as part of the fabric of the show. It set the precedent for Balanchine, Agnes DeMille, Jerry Robbins, and as they say in Brooklyn, all of them there cats. The choreographer was Charles Weidman. One of the numbers was Heat Wave, brought on by a lady who made her seat wave, sung by the great Ethel Waters, danced by the Humphrey Weidman Dance Company, and tonight, in tribute to Irving Berlin, Moss Hart, Charles Weidman, and Ethel Waters, here is Heat Wave, danced by the Workshop Ensemble of the Dance Theater of Harlem, and sung by the lady who starred in the Broadway show Your Arms Are Too Short to Box with God, and who is pretty great herself, Miss Patti LaBelle.
A heat wave blew right into town last week. She came from the island of Martinique. Oh, we're having a heat wave, a tropical heat wave. The temperature's rising, it isn't surprising. She certainly can. She started the heat wave by letting her seat wave, and in such a way that the customers say that she certainly can. She had not on me, made the Mercury, jumped to 90 degrees. Yes, sir, having a heat wave, a tropical heat wave. The way that she moves the thermometer proves that she certainly can. Yes, she certainly can.
man-made. It's so hot, a quart of tan will cover your face in the shade. It's so hot, the coldest maiden will feel as warm as a bride. It's so hot, a chicken laid an egg on the street and it's fried, honey. Woo! She's her anatomy, made of mercury, down to 93. It's her having a heat wave, a tropical heat wave. The way that she moves that thermometer proves that. Woo! Temperature's rising. It isn't surprising. Yes, she certainly can. Yes, she certainly can. She's starting to heat just by waving a seat. Woo! And she certainly can.
"1938 was a year when the world, as they say in the Bronx, should have stood in bed. Germany and Russia were using Spain as a rehearsal hall for World War II, while Neville Chamberlain and his umbrella were happily proclaiming peace in our time. At Carnegie Hall, the first jazz concert was given by Benny Goodman, who had them jumping in the aisles, and Orson Welles had half of Hoboken jumping out of bed and running from the Martians, who, according to his radio drama, were at that very moment invading New Jersey. But New Yorkers didn't believe it for a second. With the whole world to choose from, who would pick New Jersey? Why not Hollywood, where Disney presented the first feature-length cartoon, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, while in London, Hitchcock appeared with The Lady Vanishes, and Shakespeare made his debut on Broadway as co-librettist of a musical. It was the boys from Syracuse who were romping around the stage at the Alvin Theater to a score by Rodgers and Hart, inspired by Shakespeare's Comedy of Errors, if I'm not mistaken. Boys from Syracuse combined all the elements we've been talking about tonight. First, music, vintage Rodgers. Second, lyrics, vintage Hart. Third, the book. The first time a play by Shakespeare was a source for a musical, adapted and directed by no less than George Abbott, a celebrated comedic playwright and director. Fourth, choreography. In 2 words, George Balanchine. In the language of the day, it was a smasheroo, and the cast was a smasheroo. Now, we are lucky to have with us tonight the star smasheroo, the original boy from Syracuse, Mr. Eddie Albert. Eddie, I'm glad to see you.
Thank you, thank you.
I was glad to see you last night, too. But I'm delighted that you're here tonight while we're doing Boys from Syracuse, because I've been wanting to ask you, what did it feel like to be the star, very young star, of a young smash hit Broadway musical on opening night?
Well, you think you're insane, you're mad. It's such an excitement with here I was, my first musical, and all of a sudden I realized I was going to throw up. And I said, oh, please, God, not now. I'll do anything for you. And he was very kind. And once I heard my music, I rushed out there. This can't be love because I feel so well. Yeah. And so I was home. It was marvelous.
Eddie, I know you came from the Middle West.
Yes.
How did you sustain yourself? How did you eat when you first came to New York?
When I got into New York, I had quite a few friends, and this one fellow was very, very kind, and he took me over to 50th and Broadway.
The Brill Building.
Pardon me, the
Brill
Building,
Building.
yeah. And at noon every day, musicians would gather there all in tuxedos and with their horns and everything. It's high noon. And there was a fellow would go around, he was a kind of an operator, and he'd say, what do you do? And you'd say, I sing. Okay, I got a job for you. It'll pay you $25. And he'd do this with his hand. It'll pay you $25. And you knew that he was really meaning 4. But he had to do that because in negotiations there were Union spies who were going to give you a lot of hard time. And so then you'd say, $25? No, I've got to have $30. And you'd try to get him up $1, you know. And so finally you'd settle on $27.50, which was $4.50.
Back to the theater. Back to Boys from Syracuse. Balanchine.
A
What
genius.
was he like?
He was a great genius and fascinating. I worked with him also in On Your Toes when we made the film. Well, I was not much of a dancer, but anyway, I went over to the Warner lot to meet him that time, and he said, now, let's go to my house. We'll go there this afternoon for dinner, and we'll talk about it. And so we drove out Sunset, and we got just past the Beverly Hills Hotel, when all of us, and he'd been thinking the whole time, he said, stop car. And I stopped the car, very frightened, really, in a way. And he said, get out of car. So I got out on the curb there, the boulevard on Sunset, and he said, now, Slaughter on 10th Avenue. I'm Zorina, you're Eddie. You pick me up and lift me, and here, glissade, and we did a kind of a little dance up there. And then he says, no, he says, you're Zorina, I'm Eddie, and he picked me up and threw me around like that. Now there are hundreds of cars going by, you know, watching these two nuts on Sunset. But anyway, that's how I learned Slaughter.
I always wondered why they had such a long light on Whittier and Sunset. Now I know.
That's right, the whole rehearsal, yeah.
Do you remember in Boys from Syracuse?
Where they described...
Where the father describes the whole plot, takes care of it in 12 lines.
Unsuccessfully, I might add. I never could quite figure out what the story was, yeah.
One Antipholus and one Dromio from Syracuse.
Yeah.
Each a bachelor, right?
Yeah.
And right there in Ephesus, where he's landed, there's the other Antipholus and Dromio, both of them married.
Which leads to a little hanky and a good deal of panky.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that part.
Yeah, well, now, the local Antipholus is married to Adriana, right?
Yeah.
He is a dedicated playboy, as I remember, and a great stay-out.
True.
Do you remember what he replies when his Dromio asks him, don't you miss home cooking?
He said, yes, whenever possible. Yeah.
All right.
I remember that, yeah.
All right, so we're going to meet Adriana sewing with her ladies. What else did she have to do? Singing Roger's, I think, loveliest waltz.
Falling in love with love is falling
with
for
that
me.
understated heartbreak of the lyric. And it will be sung, you will be thrilled to hear, by that sparkling prima donna of the Metropolitan Opera, also known to non-opera goers as the lady who calls taxi.
Miss Roberta Peters.
You got it.
Falling in love with love is falling for make-believe. Falling in love with love is playing the fool. Caring too much is such a juvenile fancy. Learning to trust is just for children in school. I fell in love with love one night when the moon was full. I was unwise with eyes unable to see.
The Syracuse Antipholus is strongly attracted to Luciana, the sister of Adriana, whose husband is the Ephesus Antipholus. But she now thinks that the Syracuse Antipholus is the Ephesus Antipholus, and it is the Ephesus who puts the emphasis on other women. So Luciana, the sister of Adriana, is bewildered to find she feels a heretofore unfelt feeling for the Syracuse Antipholus, who she thinks is the Ephesus Antipholus and her sister's husband. But the Syracuse Antipholus, who knows he is not the Ephesus Antipholus, cannot understand why she is confused. Playing Luciana, darling Donna McKechnie, and playing the Syracuse Antipholus, Dauntless Dick Van Dyke.
Love at first sight. That's a joke, isn't it?
Oh, at first sight.
I forgot. We've known each other a long while.
Well, of course.
Yeah. You know, I think I have it straight now. For just a second there, we thought we were in love, but we're not.
Oh.
No, we're much too sane for that. This can't be love because I feel so well. No sobs, no sorrows, no sighs. This can't be love. I get no dizzy spells. My head is not in the skies.
My heart does not stand still, just hear it beat. This is too sweet to be love. This can't be love because I feel so well,
but still I love to look in your eyes. Love because I feel so well, but still I love to look in your
One night, George Abbott, Rodgers and Hart, and Balanchine were trying to figure out what to do with the scene late in the second act that just wasn't working. Adriana, Luciana, and Luce are all alone, and they're tired of being trustworthy, loyal, friendly, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, and reverent. Better be a courtesan, a butterfly. How about a songbird, says Rodgers and or Hart. How about solving the scene with a song? Why not, said George Abbott. How about writing a trio for all three of them, or a quartet for all five of them? Up jumps Balanchine. Trio. Make like song for girls singers like Boswell's sisters. I will stage. Rodgers and Hart started to write with their fingers crossed, which is not easy to do. Abbott went on to the next scene. Balanchine started to study jitterbugging, trucking, pecking, and Susie cueing, and it worked like a charm. And that's what makes good musical comedy. A merging of top talents, inspiring each other to work their brains to the bone, but enjoying every second of it, to create something that in the end seems easy come, easy go. And this kind of concentrated effort and the joy of it was contributed by all the wonderfully talented people we've talked about tonight. And in addition, Harrigan and Hart, George M. Cohan, Ziegfeld, etc., they helped create the American know-how, that tight string that holds it all together, that made musical comedy a purely American, inimitable art form. As for those three ladies, Balanchine did stage them as a takeoff on the Boswell sisters, who were the Andrews sisters of their day, who were the Supremes of their day. And there's hardly a trio which could be more supreme than Kay Ballard, who got 3 Tony nominations for her one-woman show, and Donna McKechnie and Roberta Peters doing Sing for Your Supper.
Hawks and crows do lots of things, but the canary only sings.
She's a courtesan on wings, so I've heard. Eagles and storks are twice as strong.
All the canary knows is song, but the canary gets along. Gilded bird, sing for your supper and you'll get breakfast. Songbirds always eat if their song is sweet to hear. Sing for your luncheon and you'll get dinner. Dine with wine of choice if romance is in your voice. I've heard from a wise canary, trilling makes a fellow willing. So little swallow, swallow now. Now is the time to sing for your supper, and you'll get breakfast. Songbirds are not dumb. They don't buy a crumb of bread instead. So sing and you'll be fed.
Sing for your supper and you'll get dinner. Songbirds always eat if their song is sweet to hear. Sing for your luncheon and you'll get dinner. Dine with wine of choice if romance is in your voice. I heard from a wise canary, trilling makes you willing. So little swallow, swallow now. Now is the time to sing for your supper and you'll get breakfast. Songbirds are not dumb. They don't buy a crumb of bread instead. So sing and you'll be fed. Sing for your supper and you'll get breakfast. Songbirds are not dumb. They don't have to buy a crumb of bread, a spool of thread. Just sing instead.
You don't have to buy even a crumb of bread instead.
You'll be fed instead.
This program was pre-recorded at the Wilshire Bell Theater in front of a live audience. Special thanks to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel.